So for part A, I notice that one side is not equal to 0. I notice this is a quadratic equation because it has an x squared. So I might take the time to add 30x to both sides to get something equal to 0. And then we can factor. Now, yes.
What page is this?
This is on page 186. Now, technically, when you factor, you should always check if there's a common factor first. And there is in this case. Notice that each term can be divided by 3, so I can take that out. Taking out that common factor means our life is going to be easier for factoring. Okay? And because it's an equation, technically you can either leave it with the 3 out in front, or you could have divided both sides by 3. If I divide this side by 3, well, that 3 would disappear. And what happens if I take 0 and divide it by 3? It's just 0. So sometimes with an equation, you can divide out a common factor, or you can factor it out. Either way, we get to this place where I now need to factor. And the only way I can get x squared is x and x. We have some options with 25. 5 and 5, or 1 and 25. And I hope you can quickly do the outside and inside and see which one gives you 10 more likely. It's going to be 5 and 5. And I need positive 10, so they both have to be plus. I do a quick multiplication check. It works out perfectly. So that means two things are multiplied equals 0. Either this one is 0, in which case x would be negative 5, or this one is 0, which is the same thing. And we get x is equal to negative 5. And you will sometimes hear textbooks or teachers refer to this as we got 2 equal roots. Technically, there's only one answer, right? But sometimes you'll see textbooks say there are 2 answers that are the same. And next year in grade 12, they will say this is that the answer is negative 5 with a multiplicity of 2. It happens twice. And that affects the graphs sometimes later on. So it is important to talk about that. But technically, there is only one answer to this one. And the only answer is x equals negative 5. Part B. Again, we have a quadratic equation. And I'm going to solve it correctly, and then I'm going to solve it correctly using a little mistake, because you might be tempted to do a little mistake. So correctly, I would say, hey, I notice it's not equal to 0, so I'm going to take that 20x, that's negative 20x on that other side, add it to this side to make it equal to 0. This is a quadratic equation, but we have a common factor. There's a 5 in common, and there's also an x in common. So I can pull out a 5 and an x, and be left with x plus 4. Again, split it up here. Either this first one is 0. Can 5x ever be 0? What would x have to be? X would have to be 0. And here, x would have to be negative 4. And now I'm going to rewrite the original equation will look like this, right? 5x squared equals negative 20x. Can you divide both sides by 5? Yes. So we could have started this way and had x squared equals negative 4x. Okay? And here is the mistake that sometimes students make. And I'll do it in red. They're like, oh, I want to simplify. I can divide both sides by x. And if I do that, this side's just x, Is that a wrong answer? No, it's a right answer. What's the problem that occurred?
Well, you didn't find x equals 0.
We missed an answer, right? And the answer that we missed, to add insult to injury, is actually something that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to divide by 0. Right? So one of the answers could be 0, and we just divided by 0 to find the other answer. Could be problematic. Okay? So dividing on an equation is okay, as long as you're not accidentally dividing by 0. And by dividing by x here, we missed this answer. So if you're tempted to divide by a variable, you can always instead bring it over to the other side, make one side equal to 0, and factor. That will guarantee you won't miss any answers. Okay, so lots of questions here. 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, and I put a star beside 18, which usually means that that's going to be a little harder than normal. It's going to be a bit of a problem-solving, challenging question.